The stars burned like cold lanterns across the endless night of space. The human fleet floated there, small against the massive darkness, but each ship carried the spirit of Earth. Among them was the Resolute, a heavy battle cruiser that had fought through many wars. Inside it stood Captain Elias Ward, a man who had seen both victory and loss but never allowed fear to command him. The alarms blared. Red lights pulsed across the steel corridors. The ship shook as enemy fire slammed against its armor. Beyond the viewports, colossal shadows moved, ships of the Drakkar Dominion. They were not just machines of war. They looked like moving fortresses, designed in the shape of their dragon-like masters with sharp wings of metal and burning cores that glowed like living hearts. Ward gripped the edge of the tactical table. His voice was steady, though the crew could hear the battle rage outside. "Hold the line. We can't let them break through. Earth is behind us, remember that." The crew obeyed without hesitation. They had trained under him, trusted him, and knew that humans did not bow easily. But the Drakkar had come prepared. Their weapons were far beyond human design, powered by ancient cores said to hold fragments of stars. When their cannons roared, entire ships broke apart in single bursts of light. Ward's ship fought bravely, shields holding for as long as they could. His gunners returned fire, scoring hits that made the great Drakkar ship stumble, but soon the tide turned. A direct blast tore through the Resolute, cutting into its spine. Fire spread, systems failed, and the proud ship began to drift. "Abandon ship," Ward ordered. "Save who you can. I'll cover the retreat." His officers tried to argue, but one look into his eyes silenced them. They knew he would never leave while his crew still had a chance. The lifeboats launched, glowing like sparks against the darkness. Ward remained at his station, directing defense fire until the very last gun fell silent. The next blast struck the bridge and his world went black. When he woke, he was not among his people. Cold air wrapped around him, thick with the scent of stone and iron. His wrists were bound with alien cuffs that tightened at every movement. He looked up and saw towering figures, Drakkar warriors scaled like armor, eyes glowing gold in the dim light. They carried him as though he weighed nothing, their talons clamped around his arms. Ward struggled, but the chains held firm. The Drakkar laughed, a sound like crackling fire. One of them leaned close, his fanged mouth curling into something between a grin and a snarl. "The human captain," the Drakkar rumbled. "The one who dared fight. He will make a fine gift for the pits." Ward said nothing. His silence was not fear, it was defiance. His eyes met theirs without bowing, and that only made their amusement grow. They dragged him down into tunnels carved deep within rock. The walls glowed faintly with alien symbols pulsing as though alive. Torches of strange blue fire lined the corridors, casting shadows that twisted like living shapes. He was taken lower, past cells where other prisoners, humans and aliens alike, looked out with hopeless eyes. Finally, they reached a great door, sealed with heavy chains and guarded by massive locks. The Drakkar warriors pulled it open. Inside was not an ordinary cell. It was a cavern, vast and echoing with high stone walls that bore scorch marks and deep claw scratches. The ground was blackened as if fire had lived here. The guards shoved Ward inside and threw him to the ground. The cuffs released with a hiss, but the heavy door slammed shut behind him. Ward rose slowly, his body aching but his will unbroken. His eyes scanned the cavern. It was dark, save for a faint glow deeper within. Then he heard it, the sound of chains clinking followed by a low, rumbling breath. From the shadows, something massive moved. Two golden eyes opened, burning like suns. A shape emerged, towering, scaled wings folded tight against its body. The creature's body was scarred, its scales chipped and broken in places. Heavy chains wrapped around its limbs and neck, glowing with energy to hold it in place. It was a Drakkar, but larger than any Ward had seen. This was no armored soldier. This was something older, fiercer, a war beast, a living symbol of their kind. The guards outside laughed through the door. "Let the human have company. If the beast does not tear him apart, perhaps it will amuse us." Their voices faded as they walked away. Ward stood still, breathing slowly. The creature stared at him and its growl shook the air. Smoke rose from its nostrils and fire flickered deep within its throat, yet it did not attack. The human and the dragon-like alien watched each other, silent but alert. Ward felt the weight of the moment. He was meant to die here, either by the claws of this chained monster or by despair. But he did not kneel. He spoke, his voice steady, though he knew it might not understand. "I am Captain Elias Ward of Earth. If you mean to kill me, then finish it. But know this, I will not beg." The great creature tilted its head, golden eyes narrowing. For a heartbeat, Ward thought it might strike. But then, instead of fire, it gave a sound that was almost a laugh, deep and rough like stones grinding together. The silence that followed was heavy, but within it was something strange. Not hatred, not hunger, something else. Ward realized then that he was not locked with a beast. He was locked with a prisoner, one who, like him, had been cast into chains by the same enemy. The cavern grew quiet, save for the breathing of man and dragon. Neither moved, but in that silence a seed was planted, an understanding that would change everything. For the Drakkar guards had made a mistake. They thought they had thrown a human captain to his death. But Elias Ward was not just a soldier. He was far more than they knew, and the chained dragon was not just a beast. Together they would prove it. The cavern was still. The chains rattled as the great creature shifted its massive body. Elias Ward did not move, but his mind was sharp, searching for every detail. The golden eyes across from him glowed like twin suns, following his every breath. Ward had fought many enemies in his life, machines, soldiers, even monsters bred for war. But this was different. This was no ordinary foe. The creature was intelligent. He could feel it in the way it studied him, not as prey but as something unusual. The silence stretched long. Then with a deep rumble, the beast lowered its head slightly. Smoke drifted from its nostrils, but the fire in its throat dimmed. It was not attacking. Ward took a careful step forward. His boots scraped against the stone floor, the sound echoing across the cavern. The creature's eyes narrowed and its muscles tensed, but it did not strike. "I'm not your enemy," Ward said quietly, though he doubted the alien could understand his words. His voice, calm and steady, was more for himself than for the creature. To his surprise, the creature rumbled again, a sound that felt closer to thought than to rage. Ward froze, his heart pounding. He realized then that the beast was responding, not with language he knew, but with a presence, a weight that carried meaning even without words. The chains around the creature's limbs glowed faintly, binding its power. Ward studied them. They were no ordinary shackles. Energy pulsed through them, symbols carved into the metal. It was clear that even the mighty Drakkar feared this prisoner. The human captain slowly sat down on the cold stone floor, showing his hands empty. His soldier's instinct told him that standing tall might be seen as a challenge. Instead, he sat calmly, his eyes still fixed on the creature. Hours passed. The cavern remained quiet, save for the steady breaths of man and dragon. Ward thought of his crew, those who had escaped in the lifeboats. He did not know if they survived. He thought of Earth, small and fragile compared to the Dominion's empire. Alone, despair could have crushed him. But here, staring into the golden eyes of his cellmate, he felt something strange. He was not completely alone. On the second day, Ward decided to try something more. He looked around the cavern and found a broken piece of stone. Taking it, he began to draw on the ground. He sketched the shape of a star, then circled it with smaller dots showing a simple solar system. He pointed to the central star and then tapped his chest. "Home," he said, his voice steady. The creature tilted its head. Its golden eyes flicked to the drawing, then back to the human. Slowly, with a movement that shook the chains, it lowered one massive claw and scraped across the floor. Sparks flew, and soon it had drawn something too, a jagged shape that resembled mountains and fire. It tapped the mark with its talon, then struck its chest with a sound like thunder. Ward stared. He almost smiled. The beast was showing its home. "You understand," he whispered. Day by day, they built a language of signs, drawings, and gestures. Ward learned the creature's name, Korath. When he pointed to the creature and asked, "Name?" the dragon-like alien struck its chest and released a rumble that echoed off the cavern walls. Korath. It was not the sound of a beast. It was the voice of someone who had been silenced for too long. Ward nodded. "Korath." Then he pointed to himself. "Ward." The creature repeated it, though the sound came out rough. "Ward." The beginning of trust was born. As the days turned into weeks, Ward learned more of Korath's story. Through gestures and drawings, the picture became clear. Korath had once been a warlord among the Drakkar, strong and proud. But he had refused orders that would have destroyed helpless colonies. He had defied the Dominion. For that, they chained him here, hidden from the stars, humiliated so that others would fear rebellion. Ward felt a deep respect for him. He understood now that Korath was no beast. He was a prisoner of conscience, punished for mercy. One night, when the guards threw in stale food for Ward, he split it in half and placed the larger share near Korath. The dragon-like alien watched silently, then leaned forward and ate, leaving a rumble in his throat that Ward took as gratitude. From then on, when food came, they shared it. The alliance grew stronger. Ward began to teach Korath small tricks, signals with hands that meant wait or move or silent. To his surprise, Korath remembered them. In return, Korath revealed secrets of the Drakkar Dominion. With his claw, he scratched maps of star systems into the stone, marking weak points in their defenses. Each day they trained. Ward, though still a prisoner, kept his soldier's body sharp, running, climbing, testing the limits of the cavern. Korath tested his chains, learning where they were weakest, roaring and pulling until sparks of energy cracked across the floor. Together they whispered of escape, not in words, but in looks and gestures that carried more weight than language. One evening, as the cavern dimmed into shadow, Ward leaned back against the stone and studied the scarred giant across from him. "You and I," he said softly. "We are both prisoners of the Dominion, but chains don't last forever." Korath stared at him, then released a deep rumble that shook the cavern. It was not anger, it was agreement. Ward felt a fire stir within him. The Dominion thought they had broken him by throwing him into this cell. Instead, they had made a mistake. They had placed him beside a weapon, a living symbol of rebellion. He was not just a soldier. He was a builder of alliances. And here in this cavern, man and dragon would prepare for something greater than survival. The guards laughed outside the door, thinking the human was wasting away in fear. They did not know what was truly happening inside. The silence of the cell was no longer empty. It was alive with plans, with the unspoken bond between two prisoners who refused to bow, and when the time came, the Dominion would regret ever locking them together. The cavern had become more than a prison. For Elias Ward, it was now a classroom, a training ground, and a silent battlefield where every detail mattered. Days blurred into nights, and though the guards thought the human was wasting away, Ward was learning, planning, and sharpening both mind and body. Korath, chained in the shadows, was no longer just a fellow prisoner. He was a partner. Their strange friendship had grown from silent stares to a system of signs and drawings. A nod meant trust. A claw-tapping stone meant readiness. A growl, low and steady, meant danger. Together, they had begun to weave the threads of an escape. Ward studied everything. He watched the guards each time they opened the door. He counted their footsteps in the corridor, measured how long the door stayed unsealed, and memorized the sound of the locks. He knew the guards rotated every 6 hours. He knew one of them carried a tool that recharged Korath's chains, keeping the glowing binds strong. He also noticed that when the tool flickered, the chains weakened for a few heartbeats before regaining power. Small details. But small details could win wars. Ward had survived battles not because he was the strongest, but because he was patient. Where others charged blindly, he waited, watched, and struck only when the enemy revealed a weakness. Now, in this cavern, patience would be his greatest weapon. Korath was strength made flesh. His massive body could shatter stone, his fire could melt steel, and yet he was trapped by the Dominion's energy-forged chains. But strength alone was not enough. He had learned that when he tried to fight his chains blindly, they tightened, burning his scales with searing light. Only by combining his might with Ward's cunning would freedom be possible. Each day Ward tested the cell itself. He pressed the walls, feeling for cracks. He picked up scraps of stone and metal left from years of prisoners. A rusted bolt, a shard of broken chain, a fragment of the glowing cuffs he had once worn. To the guards, these were worthless. To Ward, they were tools. Using 2 sharp stones, he scraped sparks until he managed to light a small flame. He kept it hidden. Feeding it with scraps of cloth the guards threw in with food. It was not much, but it reminded him of something important. Humans were creatures of fire too. Fire was survival. Fire was life. When he showed Korath the small flickering flame, the dragon's golden eyes glowed brighter. Smoke curled from his nostrils as if amused. But Ward shook his head and pointed at the flame, then at himself. He wanted Korath to understand. Humans could also carry fire, not just in their hands, but in their will. Korath rumbled, and though the meaning was not in words, Ward understood. Respect. Their plan began to form piece by piece. First, they needed timing. Ward marked the days by scratching lines into the stone. He counted when the guards changed, when food came, when the chain tool flickered. After 2 weeks, the pattern was clear. The Dominion's discipline was strong, but not perfect. The guards grew careless at night, speaking too loudly. Their footsteps slower. That would be their window. Second, they needed weapons. Ward could not hope to fight barehanded against scaled giants, but scraps could be sharpened. He worked carefully, chipping stone into blades. They were crude, but sharp enough to cut. He fashioned rope by tearing strips of cloth and twisting them together. Every small piece he hid beneath the straw bedding the guards had tossed him. Third, they needed strength. Korath's chains were the key. If they could weaken them at the right moment, his raw power would be enough to break free. Ward pointed to the glowing shackles and mimed the motion of pulling them apart. Korath roared softly, then slammed his body against the chains, testing them. Sparks burst and the cavern shook. Ward held up his hand, signaling stop. Not yet, he whispered. Timing mattered. If they tried too soon, they would both die. Korath exhaled smoke, then gave a slow nod. He understood. One night, Ward lay on the cold floor, staring at the cavern ceiling. His body was thin from poor food, but his mind was alive. He remembered his training, the voices of his instructors back on Earth. A soldier fights with what he has, not what he wishes for. He had nothing but scraps, fire, and a dragon in chains, and yet it was enough. He whispered into the darkness, though Korath might not understand. We are going to break this place together. The golden eyes glowed from the shadows. The deep rumble that answered him was not the sound of despair. It was the sound of agreement. The test came sooner than expected. On the 21st day, one of the guards was careless. As he recharged the chains, his tool sparked and faltered, leaving the energy weak for longer than usual. Ward's sharp eyes caught it. He looked at Korath, and the great beast's wings twitched against the chains. Not yet, Ward signaled with his hands, but soon, very soon. When the door slammed shut again, Ward crouched by Korath. He scratched a plan into the dust with a shard of stone. A circle for the cavern, an X for the guards, arrows for their movements. He pointed to the chain tool, then mimed seizing it. Korath rumbled, tilting his head. Ward struck his chest with his fist and nodded. I will get it. You must hold until then. The dragon's golden eyes blazed with fierce light. He lowered his head until his scarred snout was close to Ward. For the first time, he spoke words the human could clearly understand. His voice was deep, broken by years of silence, but it carried meaning like thunder. Together. Ward stared. For a moment, he was speechless. Then he smiled. A rare, hard smile of a soldier who finally saw hope. Yes, he whispered. Together. The next days were filled with silent preparation. Ward stretched his body, forcing strength into tired muscles. He sharpened his stone blades until their edges gleamed faintly in the dim light. Korath tested his chains in rhythm, roaring and pulling only when the guards were far away, so they would not notice the small cracks forming. When food was thrown in, Ward moved with speed, pretending to stumble, while stealing a metal clasp from the basket. Hidden in his palm, it would serve as a lockpick. The guards never noticed. Every detail was ready. All that remained was the moment. That night, as Ward lay awake, the cavern was silent except for the sound of Korath's breathing. But Ward did not feel fear. He felt fire, the same fire that had carried humans from Earth to the stars, the same fire that refused to bow before chains. He looked at Korath and spoke softly. Tomorrow. The dragon's eyes glowed and his rumble shook the cavern. The sound was not just noise. It was a promise. The plan of escape was no longer just a dream. It was real, sharp as stone, burning as fire. And when the moment came, the Dominion would learn the truth. They had locked not a weak soldier and a broken beast in this cavern. They had locked two flames together, and soon those flames would rise. The air in the cavern felt different that night. It was heavy, tense, filled with the weight of something about to happen. For weeks, Elias, Ward, and Korath had prepared in silence. Now the time had come. Ward sat in the shadows, his back against the cold stone wall. His makeshift blades rested in his hands, sharp edges glinting faintly in the glow of the chains around Korath. Every muscle in his body was tight, ready. He had fought many battles, but this one was unlike any other. He was unarmed, outnumbered, and trapped in the heart of enemy territory. Yet he was not afraid, because he was not alone. Korath crouched in the center of the cavern, chains wrapped tight around his limbs and neck. His golden eyes glowed like fire, focused on Ward. Every breath he released came out as a plume of smoke. The cavern walls seemed too small for him now. He was power-contained, waiting for the moment to strike. Ward whispered softly, his voice steady. "Tonight." Korath's deep rumble answered him, shaking the stones beneath their feet. The door opened. The sound of locks sliding back echoed like thunder in Ward's ears. 2 Drakkar guards entered, tall and armored, their scaled bodies gleaming under the blue fire torches. One carried the chain tool glowing with energy, the device used to recharge Korath's bonds. They stepped inside, confident and careless, mocking laughter in their voices. "Still alive, human?" One sneered. "The beast hasn't eaten you yet?" "A pity." Ward stayed crouched, head bowed, pretending weakness. His hands trembled, but not from fear. They trembled with controlled energy, waiting for the perfect moment. The guard with the chain tool stepped close to Korath. The glowing shackles flickered faintly as the device hummed. For a brief second, the energy dimmed. That was the window. Ward exploded into motion. With the speed of a predator, he lunged forward. His stone blade slashed across the guard's exposed wrist, knocking the chain tool to the floor. Sparks burst as it clattered across the cavern. The Drakkar roared in rage, swinging his clawed hand toward Ward. But Ward was already moving, rolling under the strike, seizing the chain tool and shouting, "Now!" Korath's roar shook the cavern like an earthquake. The weakened chains glowed, cracked, and shattered. Metal links flew like shrapnel as the dragon-like alien ripped his limbs free. The second guard reached for his weapon, but Korath surged forward, slamming his massive tail into him. The impact sent the armored warrior crashing against the wall, bones snapping under the force. Fire burst from Korath's jaws, engulfing the first guard in a wave of heat that turned his roar into a scream. For the first time in years, Korath stood unchained. The cavern shook with his power. His wings spread wide, brushing the walls, his fire lighting the darkness like a storm of suns. Ward climbed onto his feet, chest heaving, chain tool still in his grip. His eyes met Korath's. The beast lowered his massive head and Ward leapt onto his back, gripping the scarred scales like a rider. "Go," Ward shouted. "We're not dying here." "Not tonight." The great cavern doors burst open under Korath's charge. Stone shattered, metal twisted, and the corridor beyond filled with alarm. Guards rushed forward, weapons raised. But they had never faced a fury like this. Korath's fire roared, filling the corridor with searing light. Drakkar soldiers screamed as the flames swept over them, their armor glowing red before cracking under the heat. Ward, balanced on Korath's back, struck with precision. He leapt down onto one guard, his blade cutting deep into the gaps in the armor before seizing the alien's energy weapon. Now armed, Ward fired bolt after bolt into the enemy ranks. His human eyes tracked every movement, every weakness. Where Korath was a storm, Ward was the spear, striking sharp and fast. Together they carved a path through the fortress. The alarms grew louder. More Drakkar came, filling the halls with shouts and thunder of boots. The fortress shook with their roars. But Ward and Korath moved as one. Korath smashed through doors with his claws, fire bursting from his mouth, while Ward fired alien rifles with deadly aim. At one point, Korath crouched low, and Ward leapt from his back onto a balcony above, seizing another weapon cache before dropping down to rejoin his ally. The Drakkar had always thought of humans as fragile, weak, but Ward fought with something they could not understand: adaptability. He used every weapon, every scrap, every chance. He fought not as prey but as predator. Korath saw it and rumbled with approval. This human was not small in spirit. He was fire wrapped in flesh. They reached the prison levels. Cells lined the corridors filled with captives from many worlds, thin, broken figures who had lost hope. They stared in disbelief as fire and gunfire erupted outside their bars. Ward paused only for a moment. He pointed to the control panel and Korath slammed it with his claw. Sparks flew and the cell doors opened. Prisoners stumbled out, eyes wide, freedom sudden and unreal. "Run," Ward shouted. "Find the exits." "You're free." Some fled at once, vanishing into the chaos. Others stayed, picking up fallen weapons. The sight of a human riding a freed dragon-like warrior lit a spark in their hearts. Despair was replaced with courage. The rebellion began right there in the halls of the Dominion's fortress. By the time they reached the outer gates, the fortress was in chaos. Fires burned through the corridors. Freed prisoners fought alongside Ward and Korath, striking down guards with stolen weapons. The Dominion's proud stronghold had become a battlefield. At the final gate, a squad of elite Drakkar warriors blocked their path. These were no ordinary soldiers. Their armor glowed with runes, their weapons sharp as lightning. Ward gritted his teeth. They could not stop now. "Korath, together!" The dragon roared, shaking the sky itself. He charged, fire blazing from his jaws. The elite warriors raised shields, deflecting the flames, but Ward moved faster. Leaping from Korath's back, he rolled into their line, firing with both hands. His shots struck the weak points in their armor, and the shields flickered. Korath's claws tore through the line, scattering the elite like leaves in a storm. Ward landed back on his allies' back as the gate cracked and fell under their combined assault. The night sky opened above them. They were free. The fortress burned behind them, flames licking the sky. Ward looked back at the chaos they had left. He did not smile. His face was grim, determined. This was only the beginning. Korath spread his wings wide, beating them against the air. The ground shook as he leapt into the sky, carrying Ward upon his back. Together they soared into the night, leaving the Dominion's stronghold in ruins. Ward gripped the dragon scales tightly, eyes fixed on the stars above. "We're not done," he said softly. "This was just the first step." Korath rumbled in agreement, his voice deep as thunder. Together. The stars stretched before them, endless and waiting. The Dominion had tried to chain them. But chains had been broken, and now man and dragon were free, ready to set the galaxy on fire. The wind was sharp on the ridges of the alien world. Stars gleamed above, distant and cold yet promising freedom. Elias Ward held tight to Korath's scales as the great dragon-like warrior glided through the sky. Below them, the Dominion fortress smoldered, flames casting an orange glow over the jagged terrain. For the first time in years, Ward felt a sense of peace, brief, fragile, but real. He had survived the impossible, captured, chained, and thrown into the cell of a monstrous enemy. And yet, he had emerged victorious, not alone, but with an ally that no one had imagined possible. Korath's wings cut through the thin air with effortless strength. He had tasted freedom and understood it like a living flame, fierce and unrelenting. Ward had seen that same fire in his own reflection, in the eyes of humans who refused to bow even in the face of impossible odds. They were free. But freedom was only the first step. Their flight carried them to the mountains, a place far from the Dominion's reach. Here Korath's wings could rest and Ward could plan. The land was rough and unwelcoming, yet it offered cover. Stone cliffs and dense forests made it a natural fortress, a safe place to recover and prepare for the next phase of their rebellion. Ward dismounted carefully, brushing dust and dirt from his uniform. Despite exhaustion, he felt a surge of purpose. He had not survived the Dominion to hide. He had survived to fight back and to inspire. Korath lowered his massive head, allowing Ward to inspect the deep scars along his neck and limbs. Each mark told a story of betrayal and suffering, but also of endurance. Ward understood that Korath was more than strength. He was resilience embodied. "Rest now," Ward said softly. "We have much work ahead." The dragon rumbled, a sound like low thunder carrying agreement. Together they began to explore the surrounding terrain, scouting for safe valleys, hidden caves, and sources of water. Survival was simple, but the purpose behind it was vast. Word of their escape traveled quickly, carried by the wind and whispered stories among survivors. Humans who had been captured, aliens who had been enslaved. They spoke of a human riding a dragon through the skies, breaking chains and defying the Dominion. Each tale grew with every retelling, transforming fear into hope. Ward realized then the power of legend. The Dominion relied on fear to control their subjects, believing their empire unbreakable. But the image of a human captain riding a dragon, tearing through chains and defying impossible odds, challenged everything they believed. "This is why they will fear us," Ward said to Korath one night as they rested beneath the stars. "Not because we are stronger, but because we refuse to be broken." Korath's golden eyes glimmered, reflecting the distant stars. The dragon's deep rumble was low but affirmative. Ward smiled, understanding that Korath not only accepted this mission, they shared it. The next days were spent in preparation. Ward trained not only himself but the few survivors who joined them. Humans who had escaped the Dominion's grasp, creatures from other worlds who had seen their homes destroyed. All came together in this hidden sanctuary. Ward taught them strategy, improvisation, and ingenuity. He showed them how to turn limited resources into weapons, how to move silently, and how to think several steps ahead of the Dominion. Korath trained them too, though in his own way. His claws and tail demonstrated strength and precision, while his wings showed speed and mobility. To witness the dragon in action was to see raw power channeled with intelligence. Survivors who watched learned quickly. Both fear and respect became tools. By the end of the week, a small army had formed. It was not large, but it was determined. Every soldier, human or alien, carried in their hearts the memory of freedom won through courage, not brute force alone. Ward looked over the gathering. "We are small," he said, "but we are the spark. One spark can ignite a fire that the Dominion cannot contain." Korath rumbled in agreement, flames flickering faintly from his mouth in the night air. Word reached the Dominion fast. Commanders were furious. The human soldier had escaped, yes, but more than that, he had inspired rebellion among prisoners, uniting them with creatures they once thought of as enemies. Korath's presence added to the terror. The Drakkar who had chained him knew the dragon's full strength. Ward and Korath did not wait for the Dominion to strike first. From their hidden base, they began raids on small outposts, freeing captives and disrupting supply lines. Ward's tactics combined human ingenuity with Korath's power. Where the Dominion expected a straightforward fight, they found chaos, speed, and intelligence. Survivors spread these victories across systems, and the legend grew. The story of man and dragon became a symbol, whispered from one planet to the next. Children of the oppressed species drew pictures of the giant dragon and the human riding upon his back. Songs were sung in quiet corners of occupied worlds. Fear was slowly replaced with hope. One evening, as Ward and Korath rested on a cliff overlooking a valley, he spoke aloud, not to anyone, but to the stars above. They said humans were weak, that we could not survive, that we could not fight the Dominion. They were wrong. Korath lowered his head, golden eyes meeting Ward's. The dragon's rumble was low and approving. "Together," Ward whispered, "that is what makes us strong. Humans, dragons, anyone willing to fight, to survive, to protect. Together we are unstoppable." The wind swept across the valley, carrying his words to the distant stars. Somewhere, enslaved beings listened and found courage. Somewhere, Dominion commanders grew anxious. Ward smiled. They had not only survived, they had changed the balance. Time passed. Ward and Korath continued to build, teaching, fighting, and leading. They formed alliances with other alien races who had suffered under the Dominion. Each victory was small, but the ripple spread across galaxies. The legend of a human soldier and a dragon warrior grew, turning into something larger than either of them. They were not just fugitives, they were symbols. Symbols of resistance, of hope, and of unity. One day, a young alien approached Ward, wide-eyed, holding a crude map of the Dominion systems. "You, the man on the dragon?" the child whispered. "They say you can't be stopped." Ward knelt, looking the child in the eyes. "We are stopped only when we choose to be," he said. "But until that day comes, we fight. We survive, and we protect those who cannot protect themselves." The child nodded, inspired. Word would continue to spread. Hope would continue to grow. Years later, when the Dominion had shifted focus to other conflicts, the story of man and dragon endured. Across planets and secret corners of space, captives told the tale of Captain Elias Ward and Korath, the chained dragon who became free. They had begun as prisoners, thrown into despair, but through patience, courage, and alliance, they had become legends. Humans were fragile, the Dominion thought. Dragons were beasts, the Dominion thought. Together, Ward and Korath proved that intelligence, resilience, and unity could defeat even the strongest chains. Ward often stood atop the cliffs of their sanctuary, looking at the stars. Korath spread his wings beside him, ready to fly at a moment's notice. The galaxy was vast and dangerous, but it was theirs to inspire, and they would not stop. For as long as there were the oppressed, the captured, and the enslaved, the legend would live. The human and the dragon had shown the universe that no chain was stronger than courage, no prison stronger than hope, and no enemy stronger than the fire of unity. And so, in the cold glow of distant stars, Ward and Korath soared together, free and unforgettable.